certainly Robertson, Dobell, Robertson's still very, very close. Even Monero still quite close. But I think in the end, there have been three factors. One, of course, has been the sandbagging that the Labor Party have done in seats there, the redistribution, and we are seeing the effect of the redistribution in some of those seats. But most importantly, local elections. This particularly...
You're not accusing the Labor Party of organising the redistribution, surely?
No, I'm not. No, I'm just saying that there are different factors at play in different seats, and some of the results that we're seeing, I think...
Okay, briefly, I think you've got aren't you the patron of the Senate patron of
Yes.
Bennelong? So you've definitely got a new member in Bennelong, John Alexander.
I'm definitely keeping a very close eye. I think at this stage it's not to the point of calling yet, but certainly we're very happy with the results so far in Bennelong.
Okay, let's hear from Paul Howes. And Paul Howes, this story in New South Wales and Queensland, big swings against Labor. What are your thoughts on where this is going to end up, first of all?
Well, clearly a big swing, which was predicted by everyone. Nothing surprising there. I agree. Some of these seats, Bennelong is going to be very difficult for Labor to retain. Lindsay the same. Greenway, it's only 10% of the electorate counted there, so I wouldn't get too overly excited about Greenway. I think it's an amazing result that we're still in play in Robertson, and certainly speaks volumes about our candidate Deb O'Neill there, that we are still in contention in Robertson. I don't think the coalition are getting the numbers that they need out of Queensland in particular to form government in their own right, but it's still very close. And I think
have you done sums on what you think you're going to end up at?
Well, guesstimates, rough guesstimates, I think that we may be at the moment at 75. And that means that we're going to have to, that all eyes will be on Western Australia in terms of the result that we get out of that state. Whether we retain Hasluck, whether we pick up Swan, they'll be very difficult calls for Labor to pick up. But I don't think there's any likelihood at the moment of a majority Liberal government. But certainly there's been a lot of swings and roundabouts. Some of these seats that should have naturally fallen to the coalition haven't. Some seats which I didn't think would fall have. And certainly it's demonstrating that this is a very state-by-state election. Victoria is a thumping result from Labor in Victoria, thumping result. The fact that we're in contention in Dunkley is amazing, and it'll be interesting to see how that goes towards the end of the night.
Nice optimistic assessment from you, Paul Howes, but at what point do senior Labor power brokers start to think it may have been a terrible mistake to get rid of a Queensland Prime Minister, now that you've found that Queensland voters have been waiting for you with baseball bats?
Well, the reality is, Tony, that Labor was behind in the polls when Kevin Rudd was leader, and we're behind in the polls today. That was the case 2 weeks before there was a leadership change. I don't believe that there is a big personal issue in Queensland about Kevin Rudd. If you look at the bunting that the Liberal Party had throughout Queensland today, it wasn't about Kevin Rudd, it was about Anna Bligh. The Liberal Party's run a very mischievous campaign where they've tried to confuse state and federal issues both in New South Wales and Queensland. That certainly will have a large factor in terms of the swing.
So just to confirm this, you're not having any second thoughts at all about having gotten rid of a Queensland Prime Minister and basically putting this state of origin effect in play?
Well, I think the Parliamentary Party made the right decision then. I think they made the right decision today. And if you look at the Sky News exit poll, for example, that shows that Labor would have in fact done worse under a different leadership. Kevin Rudd has been campaigning very hard throughout this election. I think he was in Melbourne just a couple of days ago. He's committed to seeing Julia Gillard re-elected. Labor is united on this, and I think a lot of people, I think the Liberal Party are very disappointed. Some in the Liberal will be disappointed with the fact that they haven't done as well as they expected to do in some of those key Queensland seats.
Connie Fierravanti-Wells, let's hear from you.
Well,
I see you rolling your eyes while he was talking.
Well, obviously you haven't travelled, Paul, too much in Queensland.
I have, Connie, I have.
And certainly as I was travelling in Queensland, it was very obvious wherever I went that the fact that you did politically assassinate your leader at so close to the election, it does have, and I think the results are showing that, Paul, that it has had an impact. And certainly the many people that I spoke to said to me, and whether it was in Queensland or even in New South Wales, people said, I really don't like the way Mr Rudd was treated. And I particularly heard that from Labor voters, and in particular I heard that from Labor voters in Western Sydney. So I think by saying that it didn't have anything to do with it, well, that's obviously your line, but I think it's a bit naive to think that the Kevin Rudd factor didn't have anything to do with it.
Paul Howes.
Connie, Labor was behind. Labor, in fact, is doing better tonight based on these outcomes than we were in the polls when Kevin Rudd was the leader of the party. Now, it was always going to be a very tough election for Labor. There has never been a first-term government that's had an easy election. Think back to 1998 when John Howard lost the popular vote and lost around, 14 seats in that election. There was always going to be a number of seats that we would lose in Queensland. It was impossible to maintain the margins that we had on some of those seats.
All right, we'll have to leave you both there. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Being here.
Thanks, Tony.
And we've had a bolt from the blue in Tasmania. Elections always throw up surprises. The seat of Denison, it looks like we've got an independent. His name is Andrew Wilkie. He'd be well known for his various other attempts to win for the Greens, and as an independent in other parts of Australia. It looks like he's got up in Denison, Anthony.
Well, he's not up yet. Anyway, let's explain this. Duncan Kerr is the Labor MP. Jonathan Jackson is the son of Judy Jackson, who's a former State Attorney General. And Cameron Simpkins was a late announced Liberal candidate. When we look at the first preferences, and we can't go on to the preference counts on this, Jonathan Jackson is ahead. But when you look at the percentages, he's only got 36. Andrew Wilkie is second with 22. Simpkins, the Liberal, is third with 21.7. And the Greens are fourth with 19. Now, the Liberals have directed preferences to Wilkie, and the Greens issued an open ticket. So I don't know what Green voters would have done, but on those numbers, Labor is in deep difficulty in that electorate, and if the Liberal preferences flow as suggested, and if the Green preferences leak to Wilkie, even half, then Andrew Wilkie will be the next member for Denison.
And he has run for the Greens himself in the past.
Yep.
Yeah, but hang on, the Liberal vote is only 100 odd behind Wilkie.
But the Greens are fourth. The Greens are fourth.
Yeah, but are they going to Labor or to Wilkie?
They've open ticket.
Open ticket, okay, so, yeah.
As long as he stays ahead of the Liberals, he'll win.
Yeah, no, you're right.
I will say this, though. What's not counted tonight is the pre-poll voting.
Yeah.
Independents don't usually do that well, and he's unlikely to do well in postal votes. But we will not know the result in Denison.
So it'll depend how far he is ahead at the end of the night. Have we got any fresh information here? I know, Stephen, you've been working and reworking your list. Where is it headed?
Well, I think we've lost 13, including Melbourne to the Greens. So lost 12 to the coalition.
Which puts you on the edge of losing.
Lost 12 to the coalition. We've picked up McEwen, so we've lost 11 to the coalition. On my count, we've got Solomon, Macquarie in doubt, but where the lever, I think, is tilted against us. Greenway.
So before you get to Greenway, that takes you back to 13 to the coalition.
Yeah. Yep. It's, there's still more time on those two, but I think the lever's tilted against us. That's 13. Greenway, Morton, Lindsay Robinson, and Corangamite, I think they're all in doubt. On the most recent stuff I saw, Corangamite, Robertson, Morton, hopeful rather than confident. Lindsay and Greenway, so 50-50. So that's, if you assume the worst in Solomon and Macquarie, that's 13. There's 5 in doubt, which is 18. There's Latrobe and Dunkley, which is still possibles for us. Latrobe better than Dunkley. If it all goes bad, then you've got 18 down before we get to the west. So what I've been trying to calculate is precisely that. There are a lot of variables in that. Everything has to go the Liberal part, the coalition's way, for us to be essentially on 76 before we go to the west, bearing in mind that 76 notionally includes Hasluck and Swan. Does that help you?
So, well, all right. So now let's reduce it to the odds.
Well, I think it's your point earlier that everything might have to go right for us to end up with 76. I think we've got, certainly we'll have 3 independents, the 3 existing. We'll have a Green member for Melbourne. I think it's early days in Denison, frankly, so let's just wait and see how that one unfolds. But we, I think, are going to have to do better in the West than the West Pole today exhibited to be on 76. Now, there's a lot of variables in that. As I say, the most recent ones I saw, Corangamite, Robinson and Moreton, I wouldn't put it as high as saying the lever was tilted our way, but we're definitely in the hunt. And we have substantial amounts of pre-polls, some of which will be counted tonight. If you pre-polled in your own electorate, that'll be counted tonight, and postals which won't.
Yeah.
And the point I've made,
but the greater likelihood...
Postals are hard to read, but the first wave of postal ballot papers were distributed at the worst moment for us. Having said that, as a local member of Parliament, I have very efficiently organised postal votes for people who voted against me, so they're always hard to read.
But the sense of what you're saying is that the greater likelihood out of all of this is either a hung Parliament or a Liberal win.
Well, I must say, I think hung Parliament is looking more and more likely. I can't yet find the 17 net for the coalition. I think that's true.
Sorry to interrupt. I can't find my 76. You can't find my
76 either. I think that's the position we're in, and particularly if they lose Denison and Melbourne. I mean, I've got a net gain to the Liberal Party of 15 at the moment. If we pick up
this must be very tantalising for you, Nick.
16.
What are you counting in your 15?
Well, without running through them all, without boring the... you know, that's assuming some of those very doubtfuls do come across. But I think a hung Parliament is looking the most likely option at this point at 25 to 9 on Saturday night.
And then the next question becomes hung which way, and
that's right.
and how do the various independents respond to that?
Exactly.
So this is really the knife edge of all knife edges. Of any election I've been involved in, I think.
I'm told Anthony's computer has just given Latrobe to us, but I can't verify that from our own sources.
So what does that do?
That helps.
That takes it out of the doubtful and
puts it. Well, us winning 2 is a big bonus, but as in Latrobe, as in others, there'll be a swag of pre-polls and postals.
Okay, we're going to take a look now. We're going to come back to looking at the breadth of swings in each of the states. And we're going to start with the state of Queensland, where I think we've got 56% of the vote counted.
And what we've seen in Queensland, swing not as big as News Poll suggested this morning, but still at 5.7%, enough to really hammer Labor. And I've lost count of how many seats there are, but it's more than 6. They wanted to keep that down to 3 to 4. And at this stage, that's 5.7% swing to the LNP in Queensland, and a big loss of seats there. In New South Wales, we've seen a slightly smaller swing, 4.9%, but we're left at the end of the night with quite a number of seats on the real doubtful category. Greenway and Lindsay, we will not know the result in either of those electorates tonight, would be my view there. So there's a long way to come there. In Victoria...
And before you go on, Stephen's writing off 9 seats to Labor in Queensland alone.
We've got 0.9% swing to Labor in Victoria. So Labor's improved his position and may yet pick up 2 seats, and he's hung on to Corangamite, which was a key loss, and hung on to Deakin at this stage. So Labor's done well in Victoria.
When you say hung on at this stage, Anthony, hung on or...?
I just haven't looked at the figures for a while. Labor's held Corangamite. Labor's held Deakin. There's no difficulty there.
Okay.
Tasmania's gone the complete opposite way to the rest of the country, though we have had that surprise in Denison at this stage, but overall a swing to the Labor Party in Tasmania. We haven't had much chance to look at South Australia tonight, but let's have our first look at that chamber, a 0.6% swing to the Labor Party in South Australia. Now the next thing we're going to do is going to take a bit of a stab here about the overall result. And the reason I'm doing this, we're about to get WA to come in, and this shows you what all the numbers add up to in the eastern states. And assuming the Western Australian seats sort of fall the way they are currently, we get Labor on, I can't quite read that number.
76.
76. And that's with WA to come. So if Labor loses a seat or 2 in WA, they're on 74 and they haven't got a majority. That also does not factor in Melbourne.
That's right.
And it doesn't factor in Denison. So if Labor's 76, they're actually down to 74 with those 2 seats as well.
I think you can factor in Melbourne. I'm not sure you can yet factor in Denison.
Yeah.
But your 76 includes